Chapter 3 Part 2 Welcome Home Ash. In previous episode we have seen that Dahlia has a mysterious son and that is Red. And Red is trying to sneak out as Ash is coming over there. So let's see what's going to happen now. It was 8:30 and Dahlia was in the kitchen making breakfast for the three of them. Red went to make brief visit to Green, the trainer, as Professor Oak called it. She and Mr. Mime busied their way into another fruitful day. However, today caused the poor mother quite a bit of stress.
Mime!
He saluted to Delia, indicating that he had finished sweeping the entire house. Miss Ketchum peered down at the Mime Pokemon and smiled. She went down to Mr. Mime's eye level and thanked him for the hard work. Delia set the plate full of hot scrambled eggs and macaron on the dining room table. She looked up at the clock and exhaled softly. Suddenly, the video caller rang. Mr. Mime was about to answer when Delia stopped him. "It's all right, Mr. Mime. I got it. How about you help me set up the place?" she asked softly. Mr. Mime nodded and wandered into the kitchen to help with the servings. She picked up the phone and saw Professor Oak on the screen. "I assume he called." "Yep, just a little bit after 9, he answered. Delia checked the clock. It was already 9:20. "So what now? What Pokemon did you send to pick him up?" she asked. "Pidgeot," he said surely. Delia furrowed her brows. "But Pidgeot is in Viridian Forest. Ash released him to protect the—" "I know the story, Delia," he laughed. "Pidgeot came back here on his own a few weeks ago. When Ash called him up this morning, I thought it would be a perfect idea to send Pidgeot over. I know how much history they have when Ash went around the Kanto region. Plus, I don't think Ash ever got into finding Pidgeot after his trip in Orange Island." She pursed her lips. "That's true." She shook her head and inhaled loudly. "Then how long do you think it would take Ash to get from Vermilion to here?" The professor looked up and rubbed his chin with his forefinger. "Well, I sent Pidgeot along a few minutes ago. It will probably take an hour or two for Pidgeot to get there. And depending on the wind currents later this afternoon, it may take 3 even. Not to mention the pit stops they would have to take rest up. So maybe until 4 or 5. The mother looked around absentmindedly, calculating the time. She traced the numbers in her palm before she settled on the answer. "Okay, that should be enough time." "Where is Red, if you don't mind me asking?" "He said he was visiting Green." "Green is in Viridian City there," he replied. His brows seemed to have formed a straight line, and the wrinkles on his forehead grew saggier than before. "What?" He nodded. "Yeah, Green is in Viridian City. I doubt Red would go all the way there without telling you about it." Delia dropped her head down as her hands attached themselves to it. She moaned out of annoyance. She crouched down into a ball. With her hands on her head and her thoughts running around, she could barely hear Professor Oak call her name. Mr. Mime finished serving breakfast and noticed his trainer, with a long face and a cry. He rushed over to Delia and placed his hand on her back. "Come on, Delia. I'm sure Red is fine. He's 27 for Ash's sake," he said with a hoot. "That boy is strong. He's probably just thinking about this whole Ash coming home thing a bit. Haven't you guys dealt with this before when he came back from his trip in the Orange Island, Horn and Encino? What's there to be so nervous about?" Anne rose to her feet coldly, shocking the poor Mime Pokemon and Professor Oak. Her eyes closed with incoming tears and her lip quivered. "I know, we have done this a few times. It's killing me on the inside. I know, Red and I agreed it's best for Ash not to know that Red is his brother." It would make Ash comprehensive too much to him and resent him. I don't ever want that to happen. She paused and thanked Mr. Mime when he came back with the tissue in his hand. I hate having to put up with this day to Ash. I'm sure Red is too. I know, Ash. He's going to always compare himself to Red. It doesn't help that Red was champion of Kanto either. Ash has already asked about his father, that damn bastard. Professor Oak and Mr. Mime shared the same look of shock and fear. They have never once heard Delia say such vulgar words, nor has they seen her in this big of a mess. Delia, he huffed. I hate seeing you like this. You are like a daughter to me, you know. Well, you are technically my goddaughter, but that doesn't matter. Listen, I know how hard it is to continue to lie to Ash about being an only child and how his screw-up of a father is on some journey. But really, don't hold in such anguish and sorrow to all yourself like this. That's the one thing I have always had trouble with when I took care of you. You always bottle things up, and when something serious happens, you snap and let everything out like a maniac. I'm sure you and Red will be able to figure something out. Heck, an hour before Ash arrives, send Red over to my lab. He can stay there with me for a bit. That way, he and Ash won't meet in the house. Ash won't question why his bed looked used and everything. And you can still visit Red whenever you want. I don't think Red has much else to go other than head back to Mount Silver to freeze to death. Delia's tears continued to fall down her cheeks, but instead of her frown, she was smiling. She sniffed before she said anything. You always know what to say, Professor. He shrugged. I'm a man of many words. Remember, not only am I a professor, I'm a poet as well. She grinned. Thank you, Professor. Really, I appreciate all that you have done for me. He dismissed her comment with a shake. Don't be. That's what godfather are for. They take care of their goddaughter when their actual father is absent. Delia wiped her nose with Milex. Daddy sure is lucky to have you take care of him. The old man's bright and energetic face fell quiet. He looked at Delia with such sorrow that it gave her chills. Well, I have to take care of him. After my youngest son, daughter-in-law, and granddaughter all died in the plane crash, he was different. He isolated himself from the world. It was heartbreaking to me. He lost his parents and sister at the same time. It must have been traumatic for him or something like that. The adults remained quiet for 2 pregnant minutes. No words or sounds came out from either of them. They didn't need any verbal communication to understand how one another feels. Their non-verbal communication did just fine. Their facial expressions shared the same sadness, albeit different stories, but still held on to the pain and guilt. I shouldn't keep you from your research, Professor, she said softly. The professor nodded. You'll be well now, Delia. And remember, if there is anything bothering you, please tell me. I'm here to listen to you, whatever it may be. The corners of her mouth curled upwards. I will, Professor. The screen turned black.
Mime.
He looked up with her. His brows arched downwards and a frown greeted his face. Delia patted her Pokemon. It's nothing to worry about. I'm fine, Mr. Mime. Thank you for worrying about me. The mime was still worried, but he sensed that she wanted to be alone, so he headed to the other room and checked to see if there is anything to do. Delia walked over to the table and pulled the chair off for her to rest. Her entire body slumped back into the chair. Her head tilted further back than expected, stretching her neck. Her eyes focused on the currently off light that hung down by a chain. I wonder where Red is. If he isn't visiting Green, where else could he be? She asked herself.